All right, let's jump into a really fascinating story from the ancient Srimad Bhagavatam. It's all about Lord Vishnu's fifth avatar, Vamana. And honestly, it's a wild tale. You've got the most powerful king in the entire universe going up against this tiny little boy. And what happens next? Well, it leads to a revelation that changes absolutely everything. So, let me ask you something right off the bat. Picture a king who rules everything. I mean, the entire universe is under his thumb. The earth, the heavens, you name it. What could possibly be more powerful than that? What could top that kind of absolute total control? Believe it or not, the answer is just one word: humility. Yeah, I know, it sounds simple, but it's so deep. This whole story is basically a masterclass showing that real strength, true power, it isn't about what you can take or conquer. It's about what you're willing to give up. And the perfect person to teach us this lesson? Well, our story kicks off with him, the great Asura ruler, King Bali. This guy was the very definition of immense power. And by all accounts, he was actually a pretty magnificent king. Now, here's the thing about King Bali. He wasn't your typical run-of-the-mill villain. Not at all. He actually came from a really noble family. He was the grandson of the famous devotee Prahlada. And the guy was brave, super generous, and he was completely dedicated to his duty and keeping his word. He especially had this deep respect for the Brahmanas, the spiritual teachers. But, and this is a huge but, here's the catch. As Bali kept performing these huge sacrifices and getting more and more powerful, something else was growing right along with it: his ego. It was like this little whisper in the back of his mind that got louder and louder, saying, "I control everything, there is no one greater than me." And that, right there, is when things started to get out of balance. So, fueled by all this power and his growing pride, Bali does the unthinkable. He actually goes to war with the demigods, defeats their king, Indra, and takes over the heavenly kingdom. Just like that. So now the demigods, totally beaten and kicked out of their own home, they realize that fighting fire with fire isn't going to work here. They need a different kind of help. So they turn to Lord Vishnu. And this, of course, is where the divine plan starts to unfold. You see, whenever righteousness, or dharma, is threatened by this kind of overwhelming pride, the Lord always has a plan, but it's not always what you'd expect. It's not always about a big epic battle. So the mother of the demigods, a woman named Aditi, she starts performing these incredibly intense prayers. And her devotion was so pure, so powerful, that it got Lord Vishnu's attention. He actually appeared right in front of her and made a promise. He said, "I will be born as your son, and I will fix this. I'll restore the balance. But, and this is key, not with violence, with wisdom." Okay, so for this next part to make sense, you really need to understand what a Brahmana was in Vedic culture. Think of it this way. Their power didn't come from swords or gold. It came from their knowledge, their truthfulness, and their self-control. Their word was their bond, and it carried so much weight that even the most powerful kings would literally bow down to them out of pure respect. And so, true to his word, Lord Vishnu appears on earth. But not as a mighty warrior. He appears as Vāmana, a small, kind of unassuming Brahmana boy. I mean, no crown, no fancy armor, no weapons, just simple clothes, a little water pot, and an umbrella. It's such a perfect reminder that real power, real greatness, doesn't always advertise itself. Okay, so now the stage is set for this epic encounter. Vāmana, this small boy, starts walking towards King Bali's massive sacrifice ceremony. This is the place where the king is at the absolute height of his power and, importantly, at the peak of his generosity. And true to his nature, the second King Bali lays eyes on this little Brahmana boy. He gets up from his throne, he welcomes him with the highest honor, he washes his feet, and then, feeling incredibly generous, he makes this huge, fateful offer. He says, "Ask for whatever you want. Seriously, anything. There's nothing I can't give you." So what does this divine boy ask for? The ruler of the universe just offered him anything he wants. Does he ask for a kingdom, for gold, an army? Nope. Vāmana just smiles and makes the most ridiculously humble request you can imagine. He says, "I just want 3 steps of land." That's it. It's so small, it's almost laughable. But hold on. Bali's own guru, his spiritual teacher, Shukracharya, he's a sharp guy. He sees right through this disguise. He knows who this boy really is, and he starts panicking. He rushes to Bali and warns him, "Stop! This is no ordinary boy. That is Lord Vishnu in disguise. If you say yes to this, you're gonna lose everything." And this is the moment. This is where we see Bali's true character come through. He's just been told he could lose his entire empire, everything he's worked for. But what does he do? He chooses his honor. He calmly tells his teacher, "If I go back on my word to a Brahmana, my honor, my dharma, it's all destroyed. Even if it costs me everything, I will not break my promise." Wow. So Bali ignores the warning. He takes the sacred water and seals his promise. And the moment he does, something absolutely incredible happens. The entire universe watches as this small Brahmana boy begins to grow. And he doesn't just grow a little. Vāmana reveals his gigantic cosmic form, Trivikrama. With his first step, boom, the entire earth is covered. With his second step, swoosh, the entire heavens, everything Bali had conquered, is gone. In just 2 steps, the whole universe was measured. The promise was for 3 steps, but now there was literally nowhere left for the third one. So think about that. Bali's promise isn't fulfilled. He promised 3 steps, but the whole cosmos was covered in just 2. So what now? What could Bali possibly offer for that third and final step? This is where Bali's greatness just shines. He gets it. He understands what's happening. He doesn't complain. He doesn't argue. He just folds his hands, bows his head, and offers the only thing he has left to give, himself. He says, "O Lord, place your third step on my head." Just think about that act. That wasn't just giving up a kingdom. That was the complete and total surrender of his pride, his ego. He was giving up the very idea of me and mine. And that's really the heart of the whole story, isn't it? Real surrender is when that I just dissolves. So let's go back to his teacher's warning. Did Bali lose everything? Well, on a material level, yeah, he did. But what he got in return was something so much more valuable, it's not even comparable. The Lord was just so incredibly pleased with this act of total, selfless surrender. And the rewards were just mind-blowing. First, the Lord made him the ruler of a special celestial kingdom where there's no suffering. Get this, Lord Vishnu himself promised to become his personal doorkeeper and protector. He was given eternal fame as one of the greatest devotees ever. And on top of all that, he was promised that one day in the future, he'd get to be Indra, king of the heavens, all over again. So in the end, what looked like a total loss was actually the biggest win of his life. He traded a temporary kingdom, one that was built on his own pride, for the eternal mercy and protection of the Supreme Lord himself. That's a pretty good deal. And that really brings us to the final takeaway here. King Bali's story is the ultimate teacher. It shows us that all the power and kingdoms you can conquer on the outside, they're nothing compared to conquering your own pride on the inside. He lost a crown, but he gained eternity. And it just proves without a doubt that the one who bows the lowest is the one who ultimately rises the highest.